Thank you for joining us. We'll go ahead and get started today. My name is Landon Stott. I'm here with Craig Altum. We're part of the Vibe Resource Library. And today we're going to be talking about the administration console. This is about our 6th or 7th webinar that we've done. We've really liked these webinars so far, and we're glad that we can do another one. We do them about once a month. So next month, look forward to one about forms and workflows. We try to keep them to about a half an hour as well, so keep that in mind. We're going to be going through the admin console, but moving fairly quickly. We're also not going to cover everything that's in the admin console, but the things that we felt were most important and most used. So our agenda today is going to cover the 3 main sections of the admin console. We're going to go over the management, reports, and systems section. In the management section, we're going to be talking about user accounts, how to create them manually, and groups, manually creating groups, and then also syncing groups through the Ldap, Workspace and folder templates. In the report section, all of the reports are fairly similar. They're easy to create, but they're also very handy, so we're going to be going over the login report, user activity report, the system error logs, and the XSS report. And then in the system section, we'll be talking about a lot of things, and that's where we'll spend most of our time. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started. This installation of Vibe that we're working in is just one that we set up for the webinars for our library team. So this is as if you've already installed Vibe and synced Ldap and set up everything that way. So we're going to go in and first start with user accounts. Adding a user is fairly simple. You'll put in their user ID, their new password, all of their information, their time zone and location. It even has some Twitter settings that you can add, and then a picture. So that's if you want to do it manually through this system right here. In this section of the admin console, you can also disable and delete individual accounts. To import a profile manually, you'll come in here and choose the file that's located on your machine. Here we have a sample file of what it should look like. So here's the Vibe attribute names, the string types, and then you'll enter in the info just like this. If you have a file that has multiple different users in this format, you'll just come in and import that in through here. And that can import multiple users at once. Once you have users inputted into the system, you can come in and put them into groups. So to add a new group, you'll just come up to the top left and select Add. You can put in a name for the group, a title, and a description. The most important thing is down here at the bottom, we have 2 options, static membership and dynamic membership. Static membership doesn't change based on Ldap queries. You'll edit the group membership manually and add members yourself. For dynamic membership, that'll be changed based on the Ldap. So let's hit Edit, and that'll bring up this option here. You put in the base DN for whatever Ldap you have synced into Vibe, and then you can add a filter. The filter could be something like state equals Utah. That'll search through your Ldap and add people in that are located in Utah or whatever attribute you have that you want to filter by. You can also search the entire subtree of your Ldap and then update this group that you created based on your scheduled Ldap sync. And we'll go over that a little later of how to schedule that. And then you could test it here. When you create a group, it'll show up here. And then to delete it, you'll just select and delete. Also, to edit a group, you'll just click on it, and then you can edit it that way. It is easier to create small groups before you create large groups. For example, within sales and marketing, you could have multiple different subgroups or smaller groups that then you can put into larger groups. And we'll show that later as we go over syncing the Ldap and then also the default workspace and folder templates and landing pages. So let's go into the Workspace and folder templates. Here we have all of the standard templates that are contained within Vibe. Everything from discussions to photo albums to user workspaces, and then also custom templates down here at the bottom. To create a new custom template, you'll come up to New and select Folder. You can give it a name and a title and a description, and then just hit Add. When you hit Add, it'll show up down here under the custom templates. I created one earlier called the webinar folder. So we'll open that. And then in the webinar folder, we have a discussion folder that I created. And in order to do that, you'll go up to Manage this template, Add Folder Template. These templates are already created within Vibe. They're your blog, your calendars, your files folders that you see everywhere in your installation. So you can just select one, hit Add. So we'll put a blog in. We can see that it put a blog into our custom template. So when we go to create new workspace or new landing page, we'll have the option to insert a webinar folder, which will automatically come with a discussion or a blog. You can come in, we can hit delete this template. And it's thinking, but that deleted our discussion folder. So in order to delete the blog, we'd have to actually click on blog in this tree structure and then hit delete. If we're selected, if we're on webinar folder and we hit delete, that'll delete our whole template. You can also come in, for instance, to the files folder and come in and edit the template. You can configure the columns, the title, the comments, the size, to however you would like. You can take off the view, take off the comments, you can switch the order, or even give it your own name. And then you can set this as the default folder, for all users. So if you didn't like having the author on there, you could just come in and take it off. All right, let's go into the report section of the admin console. First, we're going to go over the login report. The login report is fairly straightforward. You just select a span of dates. It automatically chooses 1 month. And then you can search for specific people. We can search for myself. Summarize login entries by, this is if you're doing multiple users. We'll do last login, and then you can sort by user or login date. We'll hit Create Report. That'll bring it up in a CSV format, so it'll open in Excel or OpenOffice or whatever you have. And it looks like in my user in this installation, I've never logged in. I've only logged in as the admin. So you can see users that have never logged in as well. Let's go into the user activity report. This is very similar to the login report, but it's more detailed. We'll do admin since we use the admin account more on this installation. And we'll just do a whole activity summary. We won't do a month because that's too long, but we'll do just about a week. So let's create that report. Okay, so that shows which user, how many views, adds, edits, deletes, restores that they've done in Vibe. So you can see how active they are within the installation. The system error logs, when you select system error logs in the console, it will automatically bring up a pop-up and create the logs and save them to your machine. I'm not going to do that right now, but when you click on that, it'll just send you to the directory of where they're located. You can open it up and then see all the error logs that you have in your installation. Now the XSS report, this report will scan for cross-site scripting issues, and you can scan the entire workspace, the entire installation, or you can drop down into specific areas of Vibe. So let's do the blog section of the form and workflow deployment. Didn't find any problems. I don't think that in this installation it will find any problems because it's not used as often as some of yours might be. But when you do find an issue, as it says up here on the instructions, you'll just click Modify and then OK, and it will usually remedy the problem. It'll bring up each folder or workspace that has an XSS issue, and then it'll take care of it itself. The scan is fairly quick, so if you want to scan your whole installation, you can, and it shouldn't take very long. So that's it for the reports section. Let's move into the systems section, which is where we'll spend most of our time. First, I want to go over something that's fairly easy and obvious, but it's allowing guest access. There's only one option here, to allow or not allow. We have an interweb here at Novell that's in our corporate firewall that we don't allow guest access to. But we do have a sandbox area that's an external installation of Vibe that we allow guest access to. So you want to make sure that this is checked or unchecked based on what you want people to do in Vibe. This is very important, simple but important. All right, and the default landing pages. So when people log in to Vibe as a user, they can either go directly to their home workspace, which is by default, or you can select here in the admin console which landing page or workspace you want them to be directed to. You can also select a default guest homepage. This could be ideal if you have an external facing site in Vibe that you want users to go to without having to be logged in. And that you need to configure this, and that's where it will take them to. Configure file version aging. This is fairly simple as well, but if you have data quotas within Vibe that are fairly limited for each user, you'll want to come in here and configure this. If you put 30, that'll just mean that after a month, excess file versions will be deleted. Okay, weekend and holidays. For those of you that are familiar with Vibe 3.3, the new features in that, or that attended our previous webinar, you'll know that in the workflow transitions, there was an enhancement made to allow transitions based on business days. This is where you'll come in and configure in the admin console which days you want listed as business days. So here we have selected Saturday and Sunday as weekend days, and then we put in a few holidays, days that won't be counted as business days that on those workflow transitions will be skipped. Okay, let's go into the Ldap. So upon an installation of Vibe, you'll be asked to, if you want to sync an Ldap, to set up that synchronization. And so most of you probably have done this. If you haven't, though, we'll go into add a new Ldap source. And this is the page that you will see when you're asked to sync an Ldap source. So you'll put in your Ldap server URL. It'll give some general formats up here of what that'll look like. You'll put in your user DN and then the password. Here below we have the Ldap. We have identifiers, data names that will sync through your Ldap. Over on the left, the syntax is that it will always be the Vibe field name. And then on the right will be the Ldap attribute name. In order to find the Vibe field name, you'll come into Form and View Designers here on the left under System. You will go into Profile View, select User, and then you will come in to Profile Form Definition, Collapse Form, and then here you see all the default user data names that exist in the profile. So you have your user ID, data name, name, password, data name, password, picture, data name, picture, and so on. You can also come down in here and see first name, middle name, last name. So if you hover over these options, it'll bring up the data name. You'll want to copy this down because the syntax is that that will be on the left in your Ldap sync. You can also add any that you want. So you come into here and you can add a birth year or a fax, and that'll allow you to select your own data name for that option that you'll put in there. I'll show you that real quick. So if you select fax, you can use the data name fax or write in your own. Put in your own caption, and then that'll allow you to sync in a fax number through the Ldap if you have that option. So we'll go back into Configure Ldap. So this is where you would put those data names, right over here to the left. And then you can also add filters for certain DNs and so on. You can add groups that will be synced through the Ldap into Vibe. And then one of the more important things is this Ldap schedule. So if you want to have a schedule that is run automatically, so you don't have to do it manually, you'll want to enable the schedule, and then you'll want to, you can either have it go every day, weekly on certain days, at certain times. It's always Mountain Standard Time. And then repeat every however many hours that you want. Under here we have options for users and groups. So if you want users to be synced upon this Ldap schedule, you'll hit Synchronize User Profiles. You can have users deleted that aren't in Ldap. You can also delete all of their workspaces and content when those users are deleted. And then same thing with groups here. It's synchronizing group membership through the Ldap is something that we found is really easy and convenient. But also, you have to be sure to go into your groups and then add filters and make sure that your Ldap sync options are turned on if you want those groups to work properly. Okay, so that's it for the Ldap. Let's go into access controls, configuring role definitions. These are the site-wide role definitions. There are some that come pre-built that are in Vibe, like visitor or team member, workspace or folder admin. But if you come in here and drop down any of these folder roles or workspace roles, you can edit what access controls these particular roles have. So for a team member, they're allowed to add comments or replies, create entries, and so on. But if you want them to be able to delete entries or design entries and design workflows, you'll come in here and edit that. Now to add a new role, you'll just come up here, collapse, add a new role, put in your role name. We'll just call it the test role. And this is the scope of the access control. We want the scope to be over workspace and folders, not just entries. And this one will be able to add comments and replies, create entries, and modify entries. We'll hit add. And then here we have our new role, our test role. Now in order to implement this, we'll close out of the admin console. We'll go into our workspace and then enter our access controls. We can see here that it's not showing up on our default access controls. Now to make it appear, we'll go to add a role and select test. There we have our new access control role. And then we'll enable that for all users. You'll want to save the changes and then close out of that. So remember, when you create a new role, access control role, it doesn't automatically show up. Users will have to go in and add that themselves. Okay, let's go in and talk about the site branding. So in Vibe, the branding area is this part right up here. Right now, this is the default branding in Vibe. You can come in here and create site-wide branding. The branding rules down here are very important. You can select to display the site branding only that you create in here. You can have both displayed, or you can have it so that workspace branding overrides site branding. This is the option that we usually choose so that users can create their own branding area that will allow them to know they're in their workspace and it'll be specific to them. If you're not familiar with how to use branding, we have some great videos on the Vibe resource library at novell.com/vibe on how to do it. But basically, you'll come in, select Use Advanced Branding. It brings up an HTML editor that you can put in anything yourself. You can put in a background image. You can also edit the background and text color here through this hex code. But the most important thing about this is the branding rules. Okay, lastly, we want to talk about the global form and view designers. This is for the forms and workflows. In here, you can export and import global forms and workflows into Vibe. So if you're out on the resource library and you see a workflow or a form that you want to implement into your entire installation, rather than doing it in just your workspace, you'll come into the admin console, form and view designers, and select import. And then you can choose those files that you downloaded to your machine. Another neat thing about the global forms and workflows is that you can come in here to the folder views, for example, and edit any of the default file folders that are entries in Vibe, such as the Files folder. The Files folder is pretty simple. It just has a title, a description, and then it allows you to add an attachment. But say you wanted to, in the form, add a group list option or an email list option. You would come in here into Form and View Designers, and you can edit that global form of files. We're not going to go into detail on how to edit forms and workflows, but we do have videos. And our next webinar will be about forms and workflows on the 4th of September. So that'll go into a lot more detail, but it's more than we have time for today, actually. So that'll do it for our quick overview of the admin console. We want to invite all of you to ask any questions that you may have. We're going to be staying here answering questions. You can also email us at vibelibrary@novell.com, which is right here, vibelibrary@novell.com. We'll answer any and all of your questions, and we hope that you enjoyed the webinar. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again next month.